What's up, guys? Today we're going to learn some medical terminology and fun ways that I hope it makes it easier to remember. So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to go over is the roots. Some roots you have to know for medicine. Hypo, H-Y-P-O, means low. Alright? You need to know that. Hypo means low, like hypothermia, right? Hyper means high, too much. Hyperthermia is being too high. Hypo, low, hyper, high. A, when you put A before something, it means no. We're not doing that. A, normal and abnormal. The A makes it as if they're not normal at all. So if I say you are abnormal, of course that would mean that you are indeed not normal. Ia, I-A, sometimes it's like N-E-A, just to sound Ia, is oxygen. That'll come into place with things like apnea, apneic, dyspnea, tons of different words. Ia, oxygen. Pulmonary, that's anything with the lungs. Right? Cardiac, of course, anything with the heart. Some general medical terms you should know before we get into like the usage of roots. We should know like our anatomical position and how to reference anatomy. So superior towards the head. Right now my head is superior to my hand. Well, my hand is also inferior to my head. It is in fact lower. Superior, higher up on the body. Inferior, lower on the body. Posterior, that's towards the back. So like, you ever heard like guys catcalling girls and they're like, girl, you got a nice posterior? They're actually showing off their extensive vocabulary. Anterior is the front. Proximal, so proximal and distal are two words that are in reference to our trunk. So if you have your arm here, right, my wrist is distal to my elbow. So distal means farther away from the trunk, the midline. Midline's an imaginary line here. So distal is farther away from that midline. Proximal is the opposite, closer. So my elbow is proximal to my wrist, and my wrist is in fact distal to my elbow. We'll have another video with some more medical terminology, but today is just the basics. So that's all we're going to go into for anatomical reference. So let's start using those roots, right? We talked about how Ia is oxygen, or breathing, right? More aptly described as breathing. So apnea, A-nea, means no breathing. Apnea is not breathing. So if you've got an apneic patient, they are not breathing at all. Systole, as we talked about in our blood pressure video, our top number on our blood pressure is called systole. Systolic, systole, any of those things. Asystole, no systole, means they don't have any blood pressure, which obviously means their heart isn't pumping. Right? So if a patient has no pulse, they're asystole. You can remember that because they're roots. Hypothermia means they've got low temperature, right? So that's how I remember the difference between hypo and hyperthermia is hypo is low, hyper is high. Right? Therefore, hyperthermia is when someone's overheating. Hypoxia, remember Ia is that breathing or oxygen. So hypoxia is low oxygen. This is usually used to reference the cells. So like a patient can develop hypoxia at some point in their body or entirely, and hypoxia is the lack of oxygen to deliver to cells for energy. Dyspnea, dys meaning pain, should have gone over that before. Nea meaning oxygen or breathing. Dyspnea is difficulty breathing. So that's a really important one. That's one of the ones that shows up on national all the time. Hypoxia and dyspnea. Hypoxia being low oxygen, dyspnea being difficulty breathing. Pulmonary meaning lungs. So if we have anything like a pulmonary edema or a pulmonary emboli, etc., we'll go over those more advanced terms in our next video. But pulmonary means lungs. So all those you would know it's something wrong with the lungs, right? So pulmonary is a good word to know. And that's where I'll end it for today. So please make sure to subscribe and like. I have a question for you guys to answer in the comments. I want you guys to tell me whether my kneecap would be proximal or distal in relation to my ankle. Let's see who can get that right. I would suggest flashcarding those terms. I tried to highlight things that are often on tests in EMT school. They would be good to know. When you talk to the doctor over the radio, they really like to talk in the big boy terms. So, yeah, get your big brain on, pal.